What is up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back on my Hold Shift, giving you guys the format breakdown, predictions, everything you want to know about the first opening day of games coming forward for the CDL New York Subliners home series. Let's get things started by taking a look at what the groups are. Starting in Group A, Paris will be playing up against Toronto. Should be an interesting one. We'll break that one down here in a moment. And then Atlanta will be playing up against the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Let's start things off by talking about Paris and Toronto. Toronto, they looked like an absolute brand spanking new, fresh off the lot car last weekend with Kleenex in. And well, for Paris on the other side, they continue their slippery slope down. So really, you might be wondering where exactly is the good, the bad, and ugly for this series. And trust me, you're going to see one of each of those. Toronto, 6-2 in domination through their last 3 outings. That's absolutely incredible. But the bad news about that, or the slightly bad news about that, is that each of those wins come with only a slim average point differential at around about +5, meaning that they don't typically get blown out in domination, which is good news. But on the same front, they usually don't also run away with maps either. In fact, out of those 8 games, 6 of those were dictated by less than 10 points. You can kind of quantify that by saying about 40 seconds worth of game time, if you really want to put it in those terms. The other side of things, for their search and destroy and their hardpoint, those can be summed up relatively similarly. They either win or lose by a relatively large buffer. But in the last 2 outings, they have 100-point clubbed both Los Angeles teams on Hackney Yard hardpoint. This is also their best map mode that they have been able to play on hardpoint in recent history over the last couple of weekends. So there's the good news for Toronto. Things looking full steam ahead for you. For Paris, though, on the other hand, and things get a little bit more gloom here, they, in their last 3 outings, have been 2-outed in all the homestands they've played, and only combining for a 4-8 map win-loss record over that span. And in that record, they've only won a single hardpoint, a single search and destroy, and then, as the math would suggest, 2 domination wins. The worst news, though, their best hardpoint map, which they're going to need to win against Toronto, is Azir Cave. That's the default veto for Toronto. Their search and destroy has seen them drop a bunch of huge leads, and their dom losses have mostly been blowouts. So back to that good, bad, and ugly. The good in here is Toronto. The bad and the ugly might as well be characterized as the maroon and orange in Paris's logo. I expect to see a fair share of Ramaza in this matchup, and likely a 3-1 tally in favor of the Toronto Ultra. Going to Atlanta versus Los Angeles. For Atlanta this weekend, this is one of redemption. And for me personally, they get to try and prove that off the bat versus an LAG team that was able to take them to distance in Game 5 back at the Minnesota home series where they last played. The weirdness of that first matchup, though, lays truly with the domination, where last time they played, Los Angeles Guerrillas smoked the Atlanta FaZe 176-132 on Hackney Yard domination. A map that, let's be honest, has some open sores there still, as they got embarrassed most recently on that map mode combo by Florida to a score total which I don't feel comfortable saying out loud in public. The respawn has to be better for Atlanta. That's the key to victory for sure when it comes to Atlanta FaZe. And it has to be better now versus an LAG squad that was able to beat them mostly in all the respawns and is still the worst team in the league in both hardpoint and domination by ranking. The flip side, though, for Los Angeles, their search and destroy is top 3 currently in the league, and they're going up against a FaZe squad that has only dominated a search and destroy 3 times in the last 15 maps that they've played. Might seem strange to say it because they're still winning, but they have not beaten a squad past round 9 in some time. So for Los Angeles, the solution to getting past this Atlanta FaZe squad is the same thing this time as it was last time. Steal a respawn, try to take both and destroy. Bonus points if you can find a way to win the domination again. Expectations, though, aren't necessarily all that high for Los Angeles Guerrillas. I'm sticking with Atlanta in their possible quote-unquote anti-GA play style this weekend with a 3-1 after we likely will see a lot of Gunrunner in this matchup, which of course favors that of Atlanta pretty convincingly. Taking a look at Group B, London will play up against Chicago first, and then we have our home series host, the New York Subliners, playing up against the Minnesota Rocker. So starting off with the London Royal Ravens versus the Chicago Huntsmen. And where do we even start with this London team? Do we start with the incredible weekend that they had back at Seattle? Or do we kind of go back to the same fact that they have yet to beat a major team? Except for Florida, back before Florida is the Florida that we know now. The problem with trying to predict London lies simply with that fact alone. How do you predict London? Will this be the London that goes 5-1 in Search and Destroy in the weekend, all of which were blowout wins in their favor? Or is this the same London that drops round 11s versus the Paris Legion? The best way to categorize this team is that they either blow out teams or they themselves get blown out. The amount of close games that we've seen London play is minimal, very minimal compared to a number of other squads in the CDL. The problem here is that they're playing up against a very unforgiving Chicago Huntsmen team in which they have not allowed London much of a chance yet in hardpoint. There have been a couple of matchups in the past, but they're 0-4 in total versus the Chicago Huntsmen in hardpoint, and that's fine because the Chicago Huntsmen is the best hardpoint team currently in the game. Chicago, on the other hand, they have not played since the Minnesota home series, which was a while ago, so you figure they should have had some time to go back and correct some of their search and destroy questions that we had, and hopefully find a way to keep their domination and hardpoint consistent throughout this upcoming weekend. However, the bad news here for Chicago is that they've been a bit predictable when it comes to which maps they like to play versus ones that they obviously don't. This is a series that I anticipate will see very little, if any, St. Petrograd, and likely a lot of Gunrunner, if not potentially the first 3 maps in the series are just all Gunrunner. If we do happen to see that come true, that's all good news for Chicago. I've got the Huntsmen rolling through the London Royal Ravens at a tally of 3-0. New York versus Minnesota coming up next. New York is the hot topic for me this weekend, as they definitely are a top 5 team currently in the game. The problem is they have not found any success versus the current top 4 squads in their current forms. So, for this squad that has been electric in domination since they added Mac, which, let's be honest, was much needed, they continue to be a little bit of a tough puzzle to figure out in both their hardpoint and the search and destroy. Similar to kind of how the statement was about London, they seem to either blow teams out or get blown out in both of those modes, which makes me kind of wonder, is this a New York team that again just has to have a number of things go right in a row for them to win hardpoints and search and destroys? You might be able to say that easily, but it's hard to definitively prove that because there have been moments where they have just looked better than the other team that they're playing. On the other hand, though, this is again a squad kind of like Chicago that is a creature of habit. They hard veto out Azir Cave on the hard point, Piccadilly on the search, and Petra on the domination. So for Minnesota, who's been on a similar downslope compared to Paris, they've only won 2 matches in the last 3 total outings and have looked terrible at different moments in time over every single mode at some of those points in time during the stretch. The problem is, in this matchup, some of their strongest map mode combinations are those hard vetoes for the New York Subliners. So if you want to prove something, Minnesota, that the last handful of weekends, really since you went online, have just been us kind of trying to figure things out, this is the moment where you need to come through and show us that we are a prepared squad, we can beat teams on some of our weaker map mode combinations, and have a chance to get back to the playoffs. That, for me, would give a big boost to this Minnesota Rocker team, but I predict that this is going to be a 3-1 for the New York Subliners moving on to the winner's bracket. That's going to do it for this little first breakdown of what's happening on our day of games in Friday. Of course, we will be bringing the Diffuse back, your CDL post-show talk show, where Visions and Proper will be joining me at some point in time throughout the weekend to give you guys the immediate recap and some takeaways for each of our squads. So make sure you tune in live on Twitch, or if you don't have the ability of doing that, they will be uploaded here onto YouTube as well. Till next time, though, hope you guys out there keep holding it down. So long.